Hello, my name is Bill Zeranski, and my reflection will be for December 14th, which is the feast day of St. John of the Cross, and it is on St. John that it will be based. Now, what grabbed my attention is his name, his title. Now, I didn't know much about him, but I learned that he chose the name John of the Cross, and as I looked further into his life, I discovered so much had happened to him that I couldn't even think of what to talk about, but then I remember this is a reflection, so I needed time to reflect. And I did more reading, and I learned that his life was a drama. There was so much sacrifice and love in his life that, in a strange way, this sacrifice and love affected St. John even before he was born. Now, his father, who was a Spanish noble, married for love, and his wife was a member of the lower class and an orphan, which is something that wasn't done, and he was disinherited by his family. He lost it all. All he could do was become a silk merchant, which he did. But the issue is, by the time St. John was 7 years old, he passed away. So there was just St. John, his two brothers, and his mother, and they fell into a deep poverty, and it was so severe that the malnutrition affected how St. John actually grew, and his older brother Luis died. Now, his mother began her struggle to make a living for her children by becoming a weaver, and St. John went to a free school, a religious school, to learn a basic education. And he was unable to learn a trade, but he worked as a servant to the poor in a local hospital. But he wasn't bitter about it. He enjoyed working with the poor. Now, the administrator of the hospital took an interest in St. John because of this. And he had him sent to a Jesuit school where he excelled in the study of the Bible, theology, and philosophy. And after being ordained, he wished to commit his life to a contemplative life of prayer. And during that time, he had a chance to meet Saint Teresa of Avila, who persuaded him to join a Carmelite order, and also he became her confessor to her and the nuns of her order. Now, he cultivated an interest in a spiritual life to the point where he actually experienced a mystical revelation, and he drew it, he sketched it out, and this sketch, which is still kept, was popularized by Salvador Dali in a painting called Christ of St. John of the Cross. Now, Saint Teresa, and he reformed the Carmelite order, as I said, which required a celebration of the Mass, which had to be frequent, and it required fasting, long periods of solitude, and devotional study, and evangelization. Now, there is also a decision for them not to wear shoes. Now, that was part of the order's original rules, so they all went barefoot. Now, St. John of the Cross grew in influence, which actually made other brother friars very unhappy with him because of the new austerity. And on two separate occasions, St. John was actually kidnapped and imprisoned. He was accused of disobedience, even though the reforms were approved by the Spanish nuncio. Now, during a period of imprisonment, he suffered greatly, and this is how it was described. It was written down. Here we go. It says, despite John's argument that he had not disobeyed the ordinances, he received the punishment of imprisonment. He was jailed in the monastery where he was kept under a brutal regimen that included public lashing before the community at least once a week, and severe isolation in a tiny stifling cell measuring 10 by 6 feet. Except when rarely permitted an oil lamp, he had to stand on a bench to read his breviary by light which came through the cell window, which was a hole in the wall from the adjacent room. He had no change of clothing and a penitential diet of water, bread, and scraps of salted fish. But St. John's thoughts were always focused on his relationship with God and his desire to be closer to him. Now, after all this, I kept in mind that he called himself St. John of the Cross, and I think he earned the title. Because the cross is about a willingness to set aside things of the world and suffer and strive for a closer relationship with God, that you have to love people no matter what. Most of us can't run off to a monastery, but we all have a station in life which still allows us to pray and grow closer to God. We are in the Advent season now. Christmas is coming, and it's a great time for giving and receiving gifts, but we should keep in mind spiritual gifts and keep in mind the people around us. As St. John of the Cross wrote, "In the twilight of life, God will not judge us on our earthly possessions and human successes, but on how well we have loved." Keep that in mind. And Merry Christmas.